In this section, we are going to look at one of the other modules of Selenium, which is Selenium Grid, right? So till now, we have been looking at different features and commands and how do you work with Selenium WebDriver. Now we are going to look at another module, which is Selenium Grid, right? So we are going to look at what is Selenium Grid, how it works, what are the different components involved in Selenium Grid. Then finally, we are going to have a live demo of how you can set up Selenium Grid with the help of Docker, right? Some of the prerequisites of this video are Docker should be installed on your machine and running, right? You can also clone this repository if you want to follow along this video or want to set up your own project and try running Selenium tests on different nodes, right? So you can clone this GitHub repository, right? So I'll provide the URL also to you, right? So let's uh, let's start looking at first what is Selenium Grid, right? So Selenium Grid, it allows you to execute your WebDriver scripts on different remote machines, right? It may be virtual machines or real machines, right? And it could be any particular any type of machine, like a Linux machine or Mac machine or a Windows machine. Then these machines will have different browser instances, right? So what it will Selenium Grid will do is it will execute your scripts by routing your commands, right? Set by the WebDriver client or remote WebDriver client to these remote browser instances, right? So with the help of Selenium Grid, you can run your tests against multiple browsers, right? And different versions of browsers which are running on different operating systems. So that's the most biggest, that's why we use Grid, right? Now, other scenario where you can use Grid is obviously to reduce your amount of time it takes to execute your automation suite. Now, see, for example, if you have a small automation suite of around few hundred cases, you can run it in your local machine, right? So it doesn't create any problem. But think there is a huge automation test suite which contains thousands of tests and which run for a period of more than 6 to 7 hours, right? So ideally, you would not want to run on your local machines. Rather, you would have a setup where you can run these tests parallelly across different machines and browsers, right? So when you run it parallelly in multiple threads, right, your test execution will be much faster and it will take a lot lesser time compared when you run it on a single thread or a single instance, right? So Selenium Grid helps you in doing that. Now, how it works, right? So one server acts as a hub, right, that routes the JSON formatted test commands to one or more registered grid nodes, right? So one server will act as a grid hub, and then there will be several nodes or machines, right, which will act as the nodes of this particular hub, right? So whenever you write some tests and the Selenium WebDriver client, right, it contacts the hub to obtain access to these remote browser instances, right? So your Selenium web client, right? It will contact the hub. It will pass over the tests, right, in JSON format in the form of commands, and then the hub will connect to the remote browser instances, and it will execute those tests in those instances, right? So that is how Selenium Grid works. Now, if you want to have a look at the components, right? So I was talking about the Selenium client. It could be in any language, right? Your tests, which are written in any JavaScript, C Sharp, Java, or PHP, Python, right? It will contact with with the Selenium Hub, right? Which is a server. And then there will be several nodes set up by you, right? Which will be registered with this particular hub. So whenever the client passes on any commands to the hub, it gets executed on the respective node, which could be a mobile browser, it could be a Linux browsers or Windows or browsers running on Windows machine or Mac machine, right? So any particular node, it will execute on all the nodes parallelly in different threads, right? So that's how your execution will be much faster and it will take lesser time to execute on different nodes or different machines, different browser configurations, right? So this is the whole architecture of Selenium Grid. Now, how you can set the Selenium Grid, right? Now you can do it in different ways, right? So you can set up the whole Selenium Grid on your local machine, but then it will have issues like memory consumption, right? And it will be difficult to run so many nodes on a single machine because of uh, the memory requirements, right? So if you have access to different Linux machines, right, or different servers, then you can set up a hub as a server, and then you can set up different nodes on different physical machines, right? But that will require access to different physical machines, which will have different operating systems, right? Now, for this demo purpose, right, I don't have access to physical machines, and I don't want to set it up on a local machine. So I'll be going with the third way, which is setting it up on a Docker, right? On Docker, it's pretty easy because I don't need access to any physical machines, right, to run my Selenium Grid. So I will just need to create 3 containers, right? One would be the hub, and then I'll creating some other containers which will be like different browser configurations, right? So one could be a Chrome browser configuration, one could be having a Firefox browser configuration, right? So there will be three containers, right, which will be running in Docker, and our Selenium WebDriver will contact with this hub container, and then these node containers will be registered with this hub container, and uh, when we fire any commands to the hub, it will get executed uh, on these Docker containers, right? So this is the whole setup of Selenium Grid with Docker. So we are going to look at a live example of how you can set it up, how you can run your Selenium tests and on different browser configurations through the Selenium Grid architecture running on Docker, right? So let's get started. So as I said, Docker should be running on your machine already, right? So if you have not installed already, go ahead and install it and start the Docker client for your respective operating system. So I'm running Docker on Windows, right? So you can easily verify whether Docker is running or not, is installed properly by just executing the Docker command, right? It will give you a whole list of commands which are available in Docker, right? Now, I need to execute few commands in Docker. So basically downloading the images and then start running the containers and then linking the different nodes to the hub container, right? So these are the different commands which I have noted it down, right? So the first command is we need to download a Selenium Hub image using this particular command, right? So this is an image, right? And similarly, you need to, these are two different images for downloading the Chrome debug image and Firefox debug image, right? So it will have the Firefox browser and the Chrome browser in a image, right? So this might take some time, right? So let me just pause the video for a few seconds until this downloading is complete. So I'm going to actually execute all these images, right? So that it downloads all these 3 images for Hub and the 2 nodes, which are Firefox and Chrome, right? So go ahead and execute these 3 commands, and I will resume the video where once all these 3 images are completed downloading, right? Okay, so I have downloaded all the images, right? The Selenium Hub image and the Firefox debug image and the Chrome debug image, right? So everything is completed. Now let's look at yeah, so how you can verify whether your images are downloaded in Docker. So type this command docker images and it will show you all the images. So these are the 3 images, right? So next, I need to start running this container Selenium Hub inside the Docker, right? And expose these ports so that we can access this. So let's do that. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so we'll start this container. So now, if you want to check whether the container is running or not, so type docker ps and a, and it will show you that this is the container which is running, right? And these are the ports which are exposed. So to verify further, right? So go to any browser and type this URL in your browser. So localhost 4446/grid/console, right? So let's do that. And you will see this is the Selenium Grid Hub, right? So this is the configuration. Right now we have no nodes in this, so no browser configurations are being displayed, right? But we are going to do that now. So our hub is set up. Now we have to link the Chrome image and Firefox image to the hub. So I need to execute these 2 commands for that. And similarly for Firefox. So again, run the docker psa to verify that all your containers are up and running, right? So all 3 containers are running now. Now, if you want to check the logs in order to verify whether your Selenium hub is connected or is registered with these 2 nodes, right? So go type this command docker logs and then give this container ID here, and it will show you its whole configuration, right? And you will see, and the last 2 lines, it has registered a node, this and this, right? So both the nodes are now registered with the Selenium Grid Hub, right? To verify it, right? So just refresh your browser with the same URL and you will see there are 2 configurations which are available, right? So both are Linux containers, and it has got 2 browsers, right? One is having the Firefox, one is having the Chrome configuration. So this is the configuration of this particular containers, both the containers which are now registered with this particular hub, right? These are the 2 nodes from where we are going to run our tests. So now our Docker configuration is complete, right? So that's what we need to do in Docker in order to set up our Selenium grid with all the hub and nodes. Now let's have a look at the project, right? Which I have hosted it on GitHub. So it's a pretty simple, pretty simple project, right? So it's a Selenium project, which is a testng project, right? So it has got a testng.xml, and in this testng.xml, I have 2 tests, right? So one is the Chrome test and one is the Firefox test, right? Now, both are calling the same test, which is first test class, right? So there is one class, first test. I'm doing nothing. I'm just going navigating to a particular URL and just asserting whether the title is equal to this particular title, right? So that's what is happening in this test. And we are calling that test here, right? So it will be executed in both the browsers. Now we have enabled parallel tests, right, here, and then the thread count we have kept it 2. So there will be 2 threads parallelly running, and it will be executing this test on 2 different browsers, right? So that's the configuration we have done in testng.xml. And then there's a base test, right? So first test is extending the base test. So there's some inheritance concept here. Base test is the parent class, and this is the child class, which is inheriting from base test, right? All these methods and variables. So base test, what it contains, we are initializing our driver here. So we'll be using remote WebDriver instead of WebDriver. Now, it's pretty similar to WebDriver. The only difference is remote WebDriver will execute your tests on a remote machines, right? So we are using thread local for thread saved tests, right? So since we are running on multiple threads, we don't want our threads to be non-synchronized, right? So we want our tests to be thread safe. That's why using this thread local, and we are initiating this driver here, right, with the thread local. Now, since we get the driver, we are using before method. So we are passing the parameter browser here. So it will get whether it is a Chrome browser or Firefox browser, right, while it is running the test. Then it is going to execute this method setup, right? So here we are using desired capabilities. So this is a class which is used to set different browsers and different browser configurations, right? So we are passing the parameter browser here. So it will be setting the capability as a browser, which will be the Chrome or Firefox browser, right? So the browser name will be Chrome or Firefox. That's what desired capabilities is doing, right? So once you have set the capabilities of your driver, now I just need to call the remote WebDriver URL, right? So this is my URL, which we have already seen. So we are passing the URL here, and we are passing the desired capabilities, which is nothing but the browser configuration. Now you can have multiple properties here in set capability, right? You can set the browser version and other configurations of the browser, right? So you can pass everything with the help of desired capabilities. So it will be set to this driver with this particular URL, right? So then we have some other methods like get driver. It will just return the driver from the thread local map class, right? And then after method we'll have will be quitting the driver, and in after class, so we'll remove the thread local map element, right? So driver dot remove will remove that driver. So this is the whole base test class, which is being inherited by first test, right? So when we before we execute this two lines of code, which is our test, this particular test, our driver will be set up and it will be connected to the uh, remote hub, right? Which will again go to different nodes. It will set the capabilities and run those tests on those particular nodes. So this is the whole Selenium setup with Selenium Grid and running on Docker, right? Now, let's go ahead. Okay, so before executing this, right? So since our tests are running on a remote machines, you cannot see the execution um, when we execute this particular test, right? So for example, when I execute this test, right, you can see whatever is present in the logs, but apart from that, you cannot see any UI because these are running on remote machines, right? So as you can see, both my tests have started running in parallel, right, in different threads. So one is the Chrome test, one is the Firefox test, and you can see whatever logs which you are providing to your test, it will appear here, right? Apart from that, there is no UI. Now let it complete this test, and then I'm going to tell you if you want to view how your tests are running, or you want to debug for debugging purpose, you want to see the screens, right? The remote machines where your tests are running, so that also you can do. So yeah, so our test has completed running. Since we had only one assertion and we did not pass anything to the log to the console, right? So nothing is printed here, but you can see the tests, all the tests are passed in this suite, right? And See, so this is creating two sessions, right, for Chrome and Firefox. Now, as I said, if you want to view your remote browsers, right, what you can do is there is something called software called Vnc Viewer, right? So you can download this software and you can connect to your remote machines using this software, right? Vnc Viewer. So click on download, and depending on your machine configuration, it will download the particular configuration, right? So I have already downloaded this. So I will try to launch this now. So this is the Vnc Viewer software, right? Now, if you want to have a look at your containers, right? So it will have your IP and the port, right? So these are the IP and port, right? Now, the Firefox and Chrome, this is the IP. So I want to view this machine and this machine, right? So let's take the IP. We will go to file and create a new connection here. In this IP, we will type localhost and then the IP, right? We will give it a name. So we'll give it Firefox test and then click on OK, right? And try to connect here. It will give you this warning. So click on continue. It will ask for a password. So the password is secret, right? And click on OK. So it will say an encrypted connection, but this is your Firefox uh, Firefox server, right? So which you have set it up as a node. Similarly, you can also set up the Chrome node, right? So this is our Chrome node. So let's this up now. Now set a new connection again, and this will be localhost and then that particular IP, and we'll name it Chrome test and click on OK and try to connect here. Continue secret password, right? And our Chrome node is also connected, right? Now try to run your tests in your project and then go to Vnc Viewer, and you will be able to see the actual UI or the browser which is getting launched when it is executing this particular test, right? So let's start running this, and let's see on these two screens, right? The Vnc Viewer, and soon you will see a UI getting loaded here, right? Once the test starts running. So this is the Chrome test, right? So you can see the UI. And similarly, here is the Firefox test. So it is launching the Firefox browser, going to this URL and performing a validation, right? So that's what our test is. So these are the two nodes which are running in parallel, and you can view these nodes using this Vnc Viewer software, right? So yeah, so similarly, you can create a different number of tests on and any number of nodes which you want using Docker. It's pretty easy to configure, right? So that's how you can work with Selenium Grid and run your tests on different nodes and Hub, right, with Selenium Grid using the Docker. Uh, this is all I wanted to show you in this particular section. Join me in later sections where we'll be looking at um, other lessons related to Selenium tutorials, right?